you, Elmira, and it's great to be back. I was actually here last year at the equivalent panel a year ago, and actually out of that panel, Breakthrough got one of its best interns ever. So no pressure. If you're interested after we all speak in any of our organizations, obviously please come and talk to us. But if you'd like to compete with Bethany Shadis for title of best intern, please come talk to me in particular. And also, if there are 3 people who don't have much stuff, come sit here. Who wants to come sit here? We don't like to look right into chairs. We like to look at you guys. And we don't like heckle. So, awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Francis. Excellent. Thank you. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Breakthrough and a little bit about me, and then circle back to Breakthrough. So first of all, Breakthrough is a global human rights organization working to make violence against women unacceptable. So just to make this a little interactive, why do you think we say, to wild guesses, why do you think we say that we're working to make violence against women unacceptable? What is it about that word? Why aren't we saying we're working to stop violence against women or end violence against women? Why do we say unacceptable? Wild guesses. Yeah. See, wasn't it great to move to the front?
It won't actually end if people don't have the belief that it's unacceptable.
So did you guys hear that? What's your name?
Lauren.
Lauren. So Lauren up in the front said the reason she suggested that the reason we say we're making violence against women unacceptable is that it won't end unless people believe that it should be unacceptable. Did I paraphrase that correctly? Any other guesses? Or just additions, elaborations? That's pretty good. So yes, the reason that we work to make violence against women unacceptable specifically is that the area where we do our work, the space where we do our work is in changing culture, changing norms, changing the norms and cultures that enable violence to continue. So in other words, there is a lot of great and excellent work that must continue around responding to violence, around proper law enforcement response, around protection and support for victims and survivors, around addressing the causes of what makes people violent, what causes men's violence against women in this case. We complement that work by trying to get out ahead of violence and figuring out how can we prevent it from happening in the first place, or at least, in the realm of unacceptable, how can we make it weird? How can we make it analogous to let's say, this is a very imperfect analogy, but let's say smoking or the use of seatbelts. When I was a kid, everybody smoked. Restaurants, bars, there were smoking sections, airplanes, movie theaters. My dad used to smoke, he was a professor. I was retired, he used to smoke while he taught. So if you just can get your head around that. And we didn't wear seatbelts when we were kids, we bounced around in the way back. Okay, so this is just unimaginable today. Not that every single person in the world wears a seatbelt or doesn't smoke, but it's a little weird, or they have to go outside, or whatever it is, right? And so we believe that we can make violence against women men's violence against women in particular, go in that direction. And how do we do that? Well, I said earlier that we're a human rights organization. So we come from on the one hand, we come from the traditional definition of human rights, but we try to promote human rights through a different model. And that is, we believe that human rights start with you. We need and must have laws and mandates and from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and everything around it. We need it, we need it, we need it. We need state actors, we need government actors, we need all of that stuff. And we need people, individuals, everyone in this room, to treat the people around them with human rights values, according to human rights principles, with dignity, equality, and justice. And so we believe if we can inspire people to inspire other people to bring those values into the world around them, then we can actually build a culture of human rights values. And that's a culture where violence against women would be unacceptable. How do we do that? Well, one thing we do is what we sort of nickname, we use culture to change culture. So in terms of we use a lot of pop culture as well. So basically, if you're wondering if you can get paid to be an activist, and fool around on Instagram, you can, because we use all sorts of social media. We use video games, we use Facebook games, we use music videos, we use on the ground locally relevant culture, particularly in India. We use street theater, puppet theater, certain kinds of local folk dance to reach people where they are and get them thinking about the issues that we work on and bring them into what we're calling the breakthrough generation, which is the generation that will make violence against women unacceptable. And you guys, by being in this room and possibly signing up for our email or possibly being an intern, also have the opportunity to join the breakthrough generation. And we believe that if everybody in their own spheres and their own worlds works to either act on what they're thinking, in other words, bring their beliefs into public. It's one thing to sort of think all the right things. It's another thing to, it's not necessarily a win for us if someone goes home and says, "Dear diary, today I decided that violence against women is unacceptable." That's good, we like that, but we want that person to bring those values into the world. We want that person to say to any of their friends, "Hey, can we not say bitch all the time?" Or we want that person to work to support the people, like the people we work with in India. We work all over the world, particularly in the US and India. We want people to support the people that are brave enough in their communities in India to stand up against deeply, deeply rooted traditions around early marriage, around son preference, which leads to something called gender bias sex selection, which is a difficult term for a difficult human rights violation. And we want people to just bring those actions into the world, and by doing so, we believe that we can make violence against women unacceptable in this generation. So how did I wind up doing this? Well, Breakthrough has been around for about, 14 years. And I've been around for longer. And I actually spent 2 decades as a journalist, and before I went to Breakthrough, and where I'm actually the communications director. I didn't say that. So, but as a journalist, I did a couple of related things. I certainly wrote a lot, not only about social justice and feminist issues in general, but specifically about the importance of, or about the issues involving how women are portrayed in pop culture, why it's important to challenge the way people are portrayed in pop culture, a lot of stuff in the space of pop culture and how influential pop culture is and why we need to sort of harness it for good and not for evil. And at the same time, I also, back in 1997, or 96 actually, created a character with my creative partner called Breakup Girl, who is a superhero who helps men and women with romantic emergencies. And she was in a book that we wrote in 1996, and we launched a website in 1997, which is when only NASA had the internet. And our mission, she's a superhero. We had a whole comic book universe for her, and still do. You can find it at breakupgirl.net. And we had more books and an animated TV show and a live comedy show. I also used to do stand-up and all sorts of things. And what's interesting is that the vision for Breakup Girl was certainly to be funny and entertaining and helpful, but also to change the way people talked about relationships, to change the culture of relationships, straight relationships, gay relationships, whatever, all ages, all people, everything. And change the way, change the conversation, get it out of this man, my ex is bad, man, women are weird, man, men are bad, man. All that stuff is so boring and not helpful. And we also tried to create a space for women, for relationships that wasn't a space for women. Because we were like, why should only people who identify as women be talking about relationships, no matter who they have relationships with? That's just weird. So we created a space that was super co-ed and welcoming to everybody, where everybody felt safe writing to Breakup Girl's advice column, reading the comics. So there I was having, and the third thing was I had, specifically when I was a journalist, I wrote both for, and this was deliberate, I wrote both for publications that were, The Choir, The Nation and other, progressive publications. And I also wrote for Glamour. and I loved writing for Glamour. They did pay well, but I also loved writing for Glamour because it's awesome to get to write about abortion rights for Glamour. Do you know how many people read Glamour? Do you know how many people who may or may not be exposed to progressive issues the way that I am every day in my super progressive household? How many people don't have that read Glamour? What an opportunity. So I had this very specific mission around I will always write for women's magazines so that I can kind of change the mainstream by working in the mainstream, which sounds an awful lot like using culture to change culture, right? So then cut to, and it's 20 years later, and I'm like, I'm ready for a change, and I discover Breakthrough, which is basically leveraging pop culture and real life for human rights, as you understand. And they were looking for a communications director. It was pretty much a match made in heaven. So now my job description has certainly changed as communications director as opposed to journalist. But at the same time, I feel like I'm so lucky because I get to work in the same space that I believe is the most powerful space, which is whether it's pop culture or just mainstream, bringing human rights and human values into the mainstream, however you do that, making it real for everybody, making human rights and women's rights and ending violence against women real and relevant and urgent for everyone, even if they don't have personal experience with violence, even if you're not violent. It's not just up to the people who are violent to stop being violent. It's up to all of us, as Lauren said, to end the impunity and just say no and make this a world where violence against women is just this thing that went the way of not wearing a seatbelt. So that's pretty much it. There's tons more I could tell you, but I'd be happy to ask questions, and I'm much more excited to hand the microphone over to my allies up here.
Hi. Hi.
Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. How you doing?
Is that not on? Sorry.
Let me hear your voices. You know, this is supposed to be an exciting and an educational evening. And I want to let you know, my name is Joyce, Lynn, Gill-Campbell. I'm the outreach coordinator with Domestic Workers United. Now, Domestic Workers United is an organization that is made up of nannies, housekeepers, and elder caregivers. And we've been organizing the nannies and the housekeepers and the elder caregivers for 14 years now. The reason we started to organize these workers is simply because they're isolated and they work in a private household and no one ever wanted to touch them like the unions, because it was virtually impossible for them to organize a domestic worker because the way the labor law is structured. So when we started to, I got involved in the domestic workers organization because when I first immigrated to the US, I took a job as a babysitter on the side and I was studying at the Allen School pursuing a career in nursing. So while working as a babysitter, looking after one little girl, is when I discovered something was tremendously wrong within the industry. Here I was, employed as a nanny, looking after one little girl, made to wear a white uniform like Florence Nightingale, white pants, white shirt, white shoes, and everything like that. But then, I was paid $271 every 2 weeks. Now, if you divide that, that's $135.50. And I was working more than 50 hours a week. Then, lo and behold, I was asked to walk the dog. And they had 2 dogs. And one dog developed cancer. And they went out and they bought the double stroller. So you get the picture here. The little girl is one side and the dog is another side. But I love animals, but this was taking it a bit too far. So you imagine me through the streets of Manhattan, white uniform like Florence Nightingale, putting the stroller and this little girl through the streets of Manhattan. But that wasn't all that really drove me into the organization. It is like going to the playground and listening to other nannies speak. Where I thought I had it really bad, there were others that had it worse off than me. Some of them could not eat anything in that household, and those who could have eaten anything had to wait until the family finished and then go to the table and eat what was left. Some of those babysitters had to sleep in the basement. I remember one nanny saying to me where she was, and she was a living nanny. She was sleeping on the floor, on a mattress, and the bathroom, she had to go up the stairs to the bathroom. So in the heat of the night, if she had to go to the bathroom, that is where she had to go. You know, and when you think about, there was another worker, and what happened to her, she slept in the basement where the sewage overflowed. So she had to put bits of cardboard to move to and fro. And in the heat of the night, she was living, no relatives here. About 3 a.m. in the morning, she was called upstairs and told that her service was no longer needed. In 3 a.m., nowhere to go, in the head dark night. You can imagine what was happening. So we began really to organize and fight for the rights of these workers. Because as you know, that workers' rights is human rights. So when we started to fight for the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights, by asking these workers what they wanted, through a convention in 2003, what the really workers wanted was paid vacation, sickness benefit, a livable wage. When I say livable wage, don't think about that minimum wage that have just passed, because that's not a livable wage, it's what it says it is, minimum. So we were asking for a livable wage so that we can give the children what they wanted, you know, the basic necessities, so that actually families could begin to live like real human beings. Because in that, we find that these people were going to work 50 and 60 hours a week, and some of them could not even afford the basic necessity, like a telephone. Some of them would tell you that many days they had to lose the electricity because they could not pay the bill. Now what I'm speaking to you about is not in the 70s, nor the 80s, nor the early 90s. And I must make you aware that some of it is prevalent today. And all of this is because this is an industry that has been rooted in slavery. And this is a work that is not seen as real work. This is a work that has been devalued. It had to, like, you know, housework is not really valued. So then after working with domestic workers and fighting for the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights, we journeyed to Albany. And one of the things we had to do was educate the legislators about this industry. Because when we started to speak about the domestic workers, like my colleague here, they asked us if we meant domestic violence. Wanted us to be, to think that they weren't aware of what was going on in this industry when they had domestic workers in their households. Some of them were even paying them less than minimum wage, less than I was getting, which is $135.50 a week, because there are people that was getting that per month. And today that still exists. So fighting for the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights was really a challenge. We didn't have the numbers that we wanted. You imagine going to Albany to fight for a Bill of Rights, a right for workers, and they're asking you, who's your celebrities? And at that time, there wasn't the help. So we can think about, oh, those people that started the help. Because I'm one that strongly believes that the people that should be doing this is the people that is working within the industry. The people that do the work, that know what it is to be exploited and abused, are the ones that should be put at the forefront to tell these stories. So what really happened is when we fought for the bill, we had to take a lot of runs. We give some and we took some. It was true. We had to build relationship. We had to build allies. We had to do a lot of educating. We got into the schools and the university. Because I bet you that if you look into one of your textbooks right now, There's nothing really about the domestic industry, or there's very little mentioned about slavery in your textbook. And this is something that each and every one of you should know. It is not only the people of color that have faced slavery. And over approximately 75 years of people working in this industry that was treated less than human beings. Having no right to organize. And then I heard my colleague here spoke about abuse and violence. And we talked about what does domestic workers have to do with breakthrough. But domestic workers, think about it, they work privately in the household. And behind those closed doors, the unthinkable happens. Workers are sexually abused. They're verbally and physically abused. Some of them are afraid to speak about it. And why they're afraid to speak about it? Because of their status. Because this industry is an industry where roughly about 90% are undocumented. And when workers speak about being abused on the job, they are being stigmatized by a lot of people. People do not want to believe them. But behind the closed doors, a lot of these things happen. Another thing that really happened that caused us to fight for the Bill of Rights is that when you think about you're spending more time in the household with these people's children rather than your own. I was speaking to one of my members the other day, and she said, you know, when I think about it, my daughter needs to hate me. She said she spent 19 years working for one family, and her daughter is 23. And the most time that little girl has spent is with her father, not her mother. And when you think about the nanny, some of the children, the first thing they see in the morning is that nanny. And the last person they see at night is that nanny. Why? Because when mommy and daddy leave and go to work, when the baby or whoever wakes up, the first thing they see is that nanny. That nanny had to care for that child all through the day, feed them and bath them and put them to bed before mommy comes home and daddy. And I work for a family who will go to dinner on, and before they come into the house, they will always call to find out if the child was asleep. And if I say no, they stay a little longer. And they will call again, and then I have to say she's asleep, then they walk into the house. So this is you find that workers are working long hours, and they're getting very little pay. So when we fought for the bill, we had members telling their own stories. We took, at one point of the time, we took over 500 people with us to Albany. And amongst them, those were students. We took churches. We took, unions came on board with us. And all that was going on was the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights, because we had to raise awareness. Awareness to what was going on within the industry. When we fought for the Bill of Rights, a lot of people said it could not be done. They felt women, they don't have the power and the strength to do it. But all of us here sitting, we have men between us and we have women. And I know that we have to believe that we are strong and we can fight any fight. And don't ever let anyone tell you that you're a weak person because you're a woman. And I want you to understand that. And going back into the domestic violence, anytime a woman can stand up to a man and fight him, you'll see that man will change. But when you sit down and allow him to beat on you, he will never change. And every time he hits you and you ran home to mommy and then ran back to him and he beat you again, he will never change. You've got to stand up for your rights and for what you strongly believe in. And when you do that, you're saying, This is unacceptable. We will not stand for this. You respect me, and I'll respect you. We have to demand our respect as women. Give it and demand it. So when we fought and we got the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights, what we got in that bill is that these workers who work 50 and 60 hours within the household are now entitled to overtime after 40 hours working in the household. And when I say overtime after 40 hours, I must make it clear their regular rate. Because what some of the employers were doing, they were paying that at the minimum wage, which at that time was $7.25. So now, after 40 hours, that extra 50 hours is time and a half. Now, what they do also have, they are protected against discrimination based on their race, the color, the national origin, whatever you believe in. And this is really great for domestic workers. Now, we work with Urban Justice Center, which is a legal firm, and they work for us pro bono. One of the things that I do, I'm responsible for the legal intake within the industry. And what happened, workers come to me, and when I take that legal intake, then it goes to the law offices, and they represent the workers. And sitting here, I'm proud to say that we won more than $750,000 to workers who have been exploited and abused. And they were all undocumented. And it is simply because the way the bill has been structured, it is protect and it represents whether you're undocumented or not. You have your rights. You have your legal rights. And it's not, since the bill has been passed, it still happens. Actually, on a weekly basis, I have about 2 cases coming in where workers are denied their overtime, where workers' contracts are broken, where workers are actually, employers shy away from giving written contracts and try to get their workers to accept verbal contracts and then go back on that. So it is actually, still can be binding. And then you have actually the overtime pay actually is retroactive 3 years. So when a worker works in a household, maybe 9, 10 years, and then when she comes in and we realize she wasn't paid that overtime, we can go back and claim that overtime. Now most of these employers, don't be surprised to know, see that they're lawyers who know better, who should know better, but not doing the right thing. But some of them do the right thing when they get a letter because they do not want to be exposed. You understand? And I remember clearly a worker who, when she won her case, and the way how her employer wanted to give her her money was on, to avoid paper trail. They bought like 10 checks from the check cashing so that they will make 10 individual checks where the IRS will not be able to trace it back to them for them to pay taxes. So this industry, we are continuing to fight for these workers. We actually educate them. We do leadership development. We have the nanny training course, which is done together with Cornell University, and workers do basic child psychology, pediatrics, resume writing. We've just added nutrition into that curriculum, where the workers actually are preparing the foods themselves, especially for children with special needs. At the completion, they are given a certificate from Cornell, and actually also a CPR card from the Red Cross. So this actually equip these women and empower them to demand better wages when they go on the jobs. Right now we are working with Just Racial and Economic Justice on a project called the Domestic Justice Dialogue. And what this is doing is bringing the employers and the workers together so that they can have a conversation to lift the standard in the industry, to create dignity, respect, and fair labor standard for this industry which actually have been excluded from the basic labor laws of this country. We have the National Domestic Workers Alliance, which we have been part of that formation in 2007. And today we are proud to say over 200,000 domestic workers in New York City alone, and over 2.5 million nationally. So we are growing. Domestic Workers Bill of Rights have set precedent, and a lot of the other states are going forward. You know that California has a Bill of Rights, Hawaii has a Bill of Rights, and we are not going to rest until every state in this country have a Bill of Rights. Thank you.
Organization's Twitter handle. I thought we should tell everybody so that you can tweet all of the amazing things that she just said.
I don't know.
You don't know? Look it up. We won't be offended if you look it up.
Yeah.
And Breakthrough is at Breakthrough, and
Manavi 85.
cool. You want to spell it?
MANAVI 85.
And I'm also Harris Lynn at Twitter. Carry on. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Hera, and I'm getting over a bad cold, so excuse me if I cough. So I am an advocate at Manavi, and we are a community-based organization. We are actually based in New Brunswick, New Jersey, but we serve all of New Jersey, and we work with South Asian women who are facing violence. So what that means is that we're working with a lot of women who are immigrant women facing domestic violence in their homes. And as Joyce was saying, because of their visa statuses or because they're undocumented, they feel really unsafe and fear that if they speak out about what's happening inside the home, they will be deported. They will face even extreme consequences reporting to the police or the legal authorities. So these women are often really, really isolated. So let me talk about how I got involved with Manavi. I am actually a Rutgers graduate. I graduated in 2012. I studied women and gender studies. I interned with the Center for Women in Global Leadership. And during all that, I was also volunteering with Manavi. I went to the volunteer orientation, and I really connected with them because of, I think, my own background as a South Asian woman. I was born in Pakistan. I came here when I was 8 years old, grew up in the community, and I saw how limiting it can be being an immigrant woman in the U.S. in the way that, at least in my little community that I was in, the women mostly would stay at home and the men went out to work. So the women who had the limited English proficiency, whereas the men were able to go out, find jobs, and develop their English skills. And there was economic restrictions for men and the women, just because of their lower class statuses. So all these things, and then how they're compounded on the women, and lead to more restrictions for the women. So I think that's why I became really interested in this work. I became a domestic violence advocate, and that's really actually simple to do. You take a training with a state county agency. I took an 80-hour training. It was over a few months long, learning about how to work with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And I volunteered with that agency, and then I saw that Manavi was hiring, and I was still volunteering with them, and I applied, and they took me on board. And for this past 7 months, I've been a staff member with Manavi, and Manavi has been fighting for South Asian women's rights for the past 29 years, since 1985. And in my short time there, I've seen how strong of a presence Manavi has made in the feminist movement in the US, and they're even known abroad in India and Pakistan because we get calls from there from women. The level of involvement and acknowledgement that they get as a small nonprofit with like an 8-member staff in New Jersey, they get nationwide and internationally. It's really just outstanding to me. So Manavi's mission is to end all forms of violence against women in South Asian communities. And at the core of our ideology is that violence against women is a systemic problem arising from political, cultural, and social issues in society, and not an individual problem. So what that means is that we are going to work with the community. We're going to keep our ear to the ground, and we are going to go to people where they're at. As Joyce and Lynn were both saying, what we do is we hold community chais, which are our basically we get women together and have them talk about the issues that they're facing. And through those communal events, we get the discussion going about what are women's rights and what are the specific things that women face in the home. And because it's so isolating, the way that domestic violence works, it's really, really important that we can get these women together and socialize in this way on these topics. And this is why engaging the community and raising awareness is essential, because it leads to changing conditions that lead to the violence. So I want to pose a question to you. What do you guys think leads to violence against women in general, and also South Asian women in particular? I talked about some of it, but what do you guys think? Go ahead. What's your name?
Jennifer. I'm with the class for the UN Feminist Advocacy. And I think it has to do a lot with power structures, how there is a hierarchy, there's a class structure. And I've done research on how even from the very beginning of civilization, women have been at a certain sub-level compared to, because men took up the physical labor, and women were stuck with the crafting, they were stuck with maybe even domesticating animals, but they were never given the property value. And I think it stems from just that power of who has that. There's privileges, and I think that it comes around to historical references and just and how we kind of, expand on it in today's society.
Anybody else?
I think financial independence or lack thereof is a huge factor.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody else? Yeah, I think those things are both correct. And financial independence, and as Joyce was talking about, your work not being valued, especially women, the domestic work, the care work that women perform on a daily level, which is unpaid, and then domestic workers, which is, paid minimally, and, on top of it, there's a prison wall. It's so devaluing every single day that women have to do. But there's also, with the South Asian population, you have to think about the compounding factors of race and gender, and then the cultures and politics around that race, and how that's affecting those immigrant communities. So there's racism that the South Asian community is facing, let's say in the 1980s when Manavi is forming, and then how is it affecting how women can talk about their issues within that community and to the mainstream community, how it's limiting them, how it's growing their voices. So it's many issues that are always coming together for women to come out and raise their voices, which is why organizations like Manavi are so important. Manavi was actually the first organization in the United States, first South Asian organization of its kind in the U.S. And now there's, I believe, over 30 organizations all over the U.S. And Manavi is usually looked to as a model of how to go about this work, because South Asian populations and Asian populations are all over the U.S. So that's really great to see. So Manavi defines violence against women as any ideology, condition, behavior, activity that generates and maintains secondary status of women in society. And this includes deprivations, abuses suffered by girls and women throughout their life cycle. So as Lynn was mentioning, sex-selective abortions, even before the child is born, there's in India and the South Asian culture, there are those limitations already for women. And then, after the girl is born, restricted opportunities, limited health care, economic deprivations with financial limitations, sometimes it's restricted education, limitations in decision making, and then there's sexual violence, physical violence. So the list goes on and on, but we have made great strides, which is why we're here today. We're able to talk about our work and talk to you guys because we do a lot of great work and we are able to help women become independent. So on the daily level, we meet with women and we take calls from women who are in need of help. They find out about us through our website, through a friend, through family members. Sometimes they find out through relatives in India, but they're living here because they just got here 2 months ago they're on the dependent visa from their spouse, right? And they're facing abuse and they're telling their families there, and their families is like, oh, there's this organization. So that's really great to hear when we're like, okay, people know about us and they're hearing about us. So we're taking these calls, we're helping these women talk to lawyers. I'm the legal coordinator at Manavi, so I work with the lawyers in training the lawyers to be more culturally competent when they're talking to the women, so they know how to deal with the cultural issues that these women are bringing up, such as dowry, what to do when they want a divorce, but how do they handle the dowry being taken into account in the divorce, child custody, when the woman is on a dependent visa, such as H4, or all these terms, right? Can she stay here if she's faced abuse? Does she have to leave? Because there's so many, like, when you're on these visas, you have very, very little rights. It's surprising. Some of these visas, you're not even able to drive because of the limitations, even though you're living here, until, your spouse no longer works here. So it's basically employment-based. And we also do peer counseling, crisis intervention, we do support groups for the women. We provide linguistically specific and culturally specific advocacy and resources for the women. And we do accompaniments. We're there with them through the process, taking them through the systems, the legal systems, medical, social services, to help them get what they need. And it's not always that they want to become independent, because a lot of times all the women want is their abusers to stop, doing those wrong things, right? Because family is so valued, women often just want that abuse to stop, and they will be okay with it. But of course, being in the field and knowing how abuse works, abusers are not going to stop because someone wants them to. It usually is just ending it. That's the only thing that stops, ending the relationship and ending terms is what will stop that abuse. So that's our work, and thank you for having me here.
take questions now, so who has the first question? Okay, Lauren has the first question. Jennifer has the first question.
Oh, I agree. Okay, so I guess this is for all the panel. I'm really glad that you guys came here. I'm really happy that I heard all this week. I guess my first question is, how do I bring up the topic of, oh, thanks. I guess this is just a personal thing that happened lately. I've been talking with my boyfriend, and we were talking about, we're trying to bring up the subject of domestic violence against women. And I feel like there's this sense of, I don't know, maybe an acceptance of, it's even, how do I put this? There's this, I guess, this temperance where you believe that men's violence is something innate or something that comes from, you know, this hormonal savage beast that's going to come out and pop out of the bushes every time you walk down the street. You know, like this sense of, I don't know, immediacy. It doesn't give men the benefit of the doubt. You know, they're not savages, they're not barbarians, you know, and I think the rape culture I'm speaking to is how do we change that, or how do I approach this without seeming like I'm an alarmist, you know? How do I, or how do we bring up the conversation and maybe alleviate this?
I got this. Okay, so I was so eager to hear from my allies up here that I didn't go into a big chunk of what Breakthrough does, which enables me to speak to that question, because it's a very common question. It's a very good question. So to be clear, Breakthrough is a human rights organization. We're not a women's rights organization. Women's rights are human rights. People's rights are human rights. Everyone's rights are human rights. So we are, and nor are we. But one thing we do is we very much engage men to challenge violence against women. And again, we're not a women's organization doing that, nor are we a men's organization doing that. We are people who are challenging these issues in the world because we all have a stake in ending violence of all kinds. We have chosen that our angle on this matter is challenging, in particular, men's violence against women. But there are a lot of types of violence one could go after. This is ours. Anyway, so around engaging men, what we do is engage men to be leaders and partners in challenging violence against women, because violence against women is not a women's issue. It's everybody's issue. And I'm going to answer your question, don't worry. But so among the things we do, we're working on a new project here in the U.S., and imagine this, where we are building the leadership of fraternities to be campus leaders in ending sexual violence. Not just in ending fraternity sexual violence, but be the leaders on campus who are the ones who are at the forefront on campus saying, no, over. And we also produced an awesome little animation, which you can see on our website, that's actually going to turn into a series that has been shown at NASCAR events. It was shown at the Daytona 500, it's going to be shown at the Indy 500, and it's going to be shown at all Packers games, Packers home games this year. That's challenging. It's in a funny, kind of edgy way, challenging men to, or calling on men to challenge sexual harassment. And obviously, let me just, as a quick aside, obviously not all sports fans are men, but these are places, they're very mainstream places where people are seeing these videos and saying, oh, maybe I could do that. All of which is to say, the point here is not to, I'm paraphrasing from Ted Bunch, who's a great leader of an organization called A Call to Men. So to borrow from him, and this is where I'm going to help you out right now. Most men are not violent. Most men are not violent. Most men, and actually most people, are silent. And that goes back to what I opened with Lauren's help. That it's not about, oh my God, every guy's going to jump out from behind the bushes and everyone hide from the men. Not at all. It is about men holding other men accountable. It's about women holding men accountable. It's about women holding women accountable. It's about everyone who identifies as something other than women and men holding each other accountable and holding the other people accountable. It's everyone holding each other accountable for treating anyone with anything less than dignity and equality and respect unacceptable. So if you can, that's the angle I think that might help you, and that's the angle that we work on, and that's why we believe we can build the breakthrough generation, including with you guys right here, starting with you and was it your boyfriend? I didn't hear. Yeah. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Another question?
Actually, can I add to that?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
So, okay. So it really, really helps, just adding, I agree with everything that Lynn said, but adding on to that helps just clarifying that, oh, look at the statistics. We're not talking about you here, you're a great person. Like, you can tell your boyfriend, like, he's really, really a great person, so he doesn't feel like he's being attacked. So you're talking to your friends, they shouldn't ever feel attacked, but generally, this is happening. And, it's happening men against women, and then this amount, like, 5% is women are being violent against men. I'm not sure if that's the right statistic, though. But using statistics to say what is generally happening, and how can we work to end this, and how, we all have a responsibility to end, any type of oppression and abuse. It's not just, one thing, but it's an important thing. So this is why men also have to work on it. It's not like, you are bad or that man is bad. It's, just what's going on in society.
Can I have one more thing? I'm sorry, we will answer other questions, but this is super important. You just reminded me. Really who's to blame, or what's to blame, and we work on this a lot, are the norms around gender. The norms around, do you want to say, you can take it.
No, I know, I actually was going to say that because that is how some men, think that to prove I'm a man, this is what I have to do. If I don't do this, my friend is going to laugh at me. You know what I mean? They want to prove that's the way, this masculine thing that they have. It's big on the women. But inside the home, some of those guys are so different. They're so different. But they have to, this is an image they have to project to their friends, And people tend to say, people grow up and see, this is the way daddy treat mommy, and this is the way it should be. But you as a parent have to change that mindset of that child. And we don't do it. But when that child turns out to be that way, we turn and we blame it all on daddy. We don't take our share that we never took the opportunity to put that child in the right way. One of the things that I was listening to Steve Harvey, and he said he doesn't hit his daughter. And the reason he doesn't hit his daughter is because he doesn't want her to believe that men should hit women. So it's like creating a mindset and framing and building her up in a way that I do not have to stand for this if it has to happen to her. So we as women, sometimes we think about it, we help build it, and we have the opportunity, like Lynn said before, to make it not acceptable. First in the home, in our homes. And actually, what we are doing is preparing who's in the home to deal with outside when they grow up.
And the flip side is true too. In other words, the same gender norms that might enable or incubate or excuse violence, those are the norms that simply position masculinity, among other things, that position women as less than, don't throw like a girl, don't cry like a girl. So it doesn't, whether or not these norms, cause or contribute to an individual's violence, we are all affected by them. So that's how we actually build alliances between and among men and women and everybody else, because my son's 5, he likes to wear nail polish to school, and sometimes he gets teased. And the same reason, the reason that he gets teased is part of the same gender norms that incubate violence against women. It's the same. And so, so that's also, it's not only that we have to stop, the norms that enable the violence, we have to, or what I mean is we have to make it so that the people who might otherwise, where violence might flourish, we have to make that unacceptable. But we also, that's how we understand, that's how we all realize that we're all in this together. No one is not affected by those norms. No matter if we reject them or reject some of them or figure out how to reject them when we're adults or whatever it is, we are all affected by them, and that's why we all win. When we, not just those of us who, God bless, never have been or never will be a victim of violence, we all win when we can dismantle those norms. Men, women, everybody else.
In short, we're all in it together.
That's right.
Front row girls in here. Well, quickly, I wanted to comment on your fear of being an alarmist, Jen. The statistics are alarming, and it is an alarming problem, and I see the work of sexism in the fear of women's fear of being called an alarmist, And it's kind of like the same fear some women have of identifying with being a feminist. So that's just my little quick note on that.
You're only being an alarmist about the largest and most socially tolerated human rights violation in the world.
Right,
So
right.
there is a little cause for alarm, it's okay.
My question is for, I'm sorry, I can't read your name tag now, Joyce?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a nanny. I've been babysitting and working with kids since I was a kid, pretty much. My mom was a housekeeper, so my first nanny job was as mother's helper kind of thing. So I would, sometimes the woman would leave her kids with my mom, or, I would take, play with the little one while my mom was cleaning. And now I do it. That's how I support myself. But through my nanny job now, which I actually finally, in my 30 years of whatever, found a family that values the work and really thinks of the importance of, I'm leaving my kids with you, and they know that I need to make rent, and they take care of me and, have made me part of the family, but that's not the way it's been. And I nannied in New York for 3 years, and so some of these issues are really, they were very visceral. But my question is about the au pair system, and through my nanny job now, I have met a bunch of au pairs that work in New Jersey and come through this program, and they pretty much get paid $200 like a month or something crazy like that, something really insane. Like they're supposed to be grateful because they get room and board, and the family in particular that I know who they work for really just milk every ounce of work out of them and take advantage a lot. And if they make them pay for gas, or they make them stay, they don't get any out. They have the weekend off maybe, but other than that, they work up to 60 hours a week and probably see much more of the people's children than the parents do. But how does your organization work? How can you affect the programs that people sign off on and come here on this particular, they're not American citizens, so how can they be protected? Or is that something organizing that they need to do within their own countries, within this system? But I don't know. To me, I couldn't believe it. It seemed.
Well, actually, like I said, the law, the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights, is city legislation, is New York. Has nothing to do with Jersey.
Right.
But what that does, it protects, it was passed to cover the documented as well as the undocumented. And it is law, and it must be carried out, right? And the employers cannot retaliate. Before I leave, I only have one, I'll give it to you from the Department of Labor, that clearly states what is for the employers and what is for the employees. And what we did, we came up with a We Care poster, and I'll post that to Elmira, because as you notice, I could walk with a lot of load due to accident there. And that We Care poster, what we have in that poster is telling the worker what they should have from their employers. The au pairs are not really covered. And if you look at the labor law, how it's structured with those au pairs in the work. And then when you look at what we also do is like through the way we educate workers, the way we do our outreach. We go to playgrounds, wherever we find nannies, even in the schools, the homes, wherever we find them, and we educate them. One of the things that I want to make clear is, yes, we know that most of the nannies are undocumented. But I don't know if you will be surprised to learn that a lot of the domestic workers, some are doctors, some have been nurses, some have been lawyers, professors, and teachers in their countries. But when they migrate here, because of the status and the way it's a matter of survival because of globalization, they accept these jobs until. And you know, like when you journey from one country to the next, all your credentials doesn't have the value it have within your country. So that is why I've driven with people, taxis. There was a guy from Africa, he was a professor, but he is a taxi driver here. But what I'm saying that the bill, however it was structured, and it was structured, we had the help of law students from NYU, and it took a lot of work for us to actually have people without status protected that are working in the homes, you know, and that how to eradicate some of the problems we had where employers will say, you can't do this because you don't have any status. And like you said, you work with a family who actually treat you like a human being, right? The last family, the family after the one was the family from hell. So I work with a family that to this day, we still have a beautiful relationship. They had 2 kids, a girl and a boy. The girl, she is at Chicago University. And we still have a collaboration. I know whatever she's doing, I know how she's doing in school. The family and I, we talk on a daily basis, the little boy, and that's a beautiful family. The first computer I own to do my work, and they support me in this work, came from them. You know, but I'm not saying that not all the employers are the same. We have some good ones, we have some not so good ones, and we have those that wanted to do the right thing, but because there were no set guidelines, they took advantage of the workers.
How do you deal with being paid under the table? Like, how do women, because I know I've been in the position before where I was afraid to ask to be put on the books, and that is just, you know, like or else I would have lost my job because they would find somebody else who would prefer to be paid under the table. But how difficult it was, you know, it was so difficult to even apply for school or do anything in my life, you know, like until like I had to try and figure out how to understand like how to file my taxes, you know, as Schedule C or whatever, you know, like.
Put that fear behind you. And I'll tell you why I say that. Now, they have workers that say when they ask to be put on the books, the employer tell them no, file self-employed. You know why? They are actually off that hook, the employees, from paying their share of the Social Security, etc. But if you have to ask for it and they retaliate, you'd be surprised. Some of them say, oh, we pay. And when they fired a lot of the workers and they come to us, we realized nothing was paid. And then some of them paid up. Pay up because they actually don't want to go before the courts. You understand? I'll give you an example. I used to work in Hoboken at one time. And I remember they said they were going to pay the taxes and everything. And there were 2 lawyers. And I remember January the following year came and I did not get a W-2 form. And when I asked for my W-2 form, you would not believe that the lady said to me, I didn't know we had to give you one. I'm speaking about a lawyer. And then she gave me this W-2 form a couple of weeks after. And when I looked at that W-2 form, the only thing that was on it was Social Security. And you know what that meant? That I would have to pay the whole year of everything. And then I took it to my lawyer. And they had to pay the issue. So you see, that's why we educate the workers. We bring in people from the tax department. We bring in people from the human rights and the labor. Right now, as you know, paid sick leave have passed. And that also includes the domestic worker. Now, what I have done for this meeting, general membership meeting, that is the 19th of this, the 17th of this month, I have someone from the Human Rights Division, from the consumers, coming in to speak to the workers about paid sick days, so that they have an idea and then know what to expect, that no one can push it around. The whole thing is about educating the workers, educating, creating like a forum to give the people the knowledge that they need. Because once before you even that, you will find, like in the playground, babysitter will say, you know, so, don't do that, don't answer for that all the time. She will fire you. And create that fear. But when you know, no, she cannot fire me, it stays here in the Department of Labor, they cannot retaliate. And you know and you can tell them, it builds our membership. Because those people come in because they want to know. So you have to keep on educating. And that is why we as activists and organizers, our job can never end. We have to keep on organizing. That's what we have to do.
All right, other questions?
My question is for you, Lynn. I find it really interesting and awesome how you were able to write about progressive issues for mainstream magazines like Glamour and things like that. And I find myself a lot of times when I'm having conversations with, my women's studies friends, talking about these issues in a much different way than I am able to talk about them with people who don't have like a background in feminism and understanding. So I was just curious, in what ways did you or did you not even have to change the way you wrote about these topics to reach the women or the people who read more mainstream publications than your more progressive ones?
So that's a good question. Let me try to remember. The two things that leapt to mind while you were asking were, one is that with significant exceptions, writing about them for mainstream women's magazines revolved a lot more around personal stories, and telling the stories that way, doing the advocacy that way. And I should also say, as an aside, that especially when I was doing this, there were a lot more women's magazines. There was 17, Mademoiselle, a whole bunch that have, I can't even remember all the ones that have disappeared, and they were all very different, actually. Even though people tend to say women's magazines, Glamour was the first one that had a political column that was called "What Have They Done for Us Lately?" that tracked every month what female legislators had not done to support women's rights. It was the first one to write about abortion. It was really out there at the forefront. And you could complain about the lipstick and whatever, but it's the lipstick ads that pay for the editorial space for the other stuff. So. And also, some of us enjoy lipstick. So that's one thing. A lot more personal stories. I would say a lot more personal stories and a lot less shorthand. That there are certain things. I used to blog for Salon. Used to have a women's issues blog called Broadsheet, and I was one of the founding bloggers for that. And you can just write in all sorts of shorthand for that, and I can't think of an example, but just code or shared terminology, like the stuff that you use with your women's studies friends that I wouldn't use when writing something similar for Ladies' Home Journal or whatever. I would just spell it out. So I wouldn't say it's a matter of dumbing it down or anything that I felt uncomfortable with. It was more of just like, any of you want to be writers or frankly do any of this work, and advocates, constituency builders, you gotta know your audience, and you've got to speak to your audience. So that's really what it was all about.
Can you say something about some of the cultural ways in which you use culture? His film is the first film she made, or the stuff the film that you made about knocking on the
Sure. Sure. 3 quick examples of products that we've made that have been part of larger campaigns or ongoing advocacy efforts to make change. The 3 really quick examples that, let's see, 2 really quick examples that leap to mind are from earlier breakthrough projects. The first one was, and this is the project on which Breakthrough was founded. Malika Dutt, who's the president and CEO who Elmira referred to, and the founder, had for a long time done a lot of very good and very valuable human rights work, whether at the Ford Foundation or the UN, or she was a co-founder of Saki, which you probably know. And
she was here.
And she was here, yes. Most important, I was saving the best for last. But at a certain point, 14 years ago, she started to feel like she was talking to the same wonderful people, but the same 250 people. And how do we bring all this important work that we're doing, not just directly to individual communities where we might work, and not just into our own echo chamber, but to the world? How do we get it into the mainstream? And that's where this all came from. She cooked up this idea. She was in this. Happened in India at the time. She cooked up an idea to create a music album, and we called them albums then, and a music video about women's rights, very much in the mainstream pop space, with one of the most popular Bollywood singers, and who was a woman and lots of men who work on the lyricist and the producer, and all those people were very successful men in the Bollywood and the music scene, and she little by little got it together, even as she was told, you can't put it, you'll never be able to do that, no one's going to buy it, no one's going to even produce it, forget it. Of course, she put the album together, put the title song, or the title track is called Man Ke Manjire. It's an album of women's dreams, and the title song and video show a woman who, in sort of quick scenes that you don't really see very clearly, escapes a violent relationship and becomes a truck driver, which is not that common, but it's based on a real story. And so even though there's this background of why she became a truck driver, it actually turns into this really festive, danceable, pop, celebratory video about freedom. And the music, even today, it's 14 years old, the music is it still sounds totally current and awesome. And so that video, where this is going, the album and the video were all over the charts in India for weeks and months. The video won 1 million awards, and it brought domestic violence into the public conversation in India, which was not a thing before that. It was not a thing. People knew about it, but it was none of your business. You didn't talk about it, even if you knew it was happening, that was it. Which ultimately led to a subsequent project, which is ongoing, the calling card of which were a series of ads. The project is called Bell Baja, which means ring the bell in Hindi. And the ads were kind of a visualization and a metaphor of the whole effort. Which there were 3, and then we did 3 more based on real stories that we got after the first 3. They were highly produced by our ad partners, Ogilvy and Mather in India, who each of them depicted a man or a group of men overhearing domestic violence inside an apartment. And they were outside, the noise was coming from inside, and the man who hears it goes, and kind of thinks for a minute, and then resolves himself and walks up the stairs and rings the bell. And the noise stops, and the man inside opens the door, and the man who rang the bell, depending on the PSA, asks for milk or to borrow the person's phone, or what time it is. And then within the next couple of seconds, you realize he has a watch, he has a phone. That's not what he's asking. And there's this moment where the 2 men kind of look at each other, and there's a very heavy silence, and the man inside knows that there's no confrontation. The guy who hears the violence isn't like barging in like a superhero or Rambo or whatever. He's just saying implicitly, I hear you. Whatever's going on inside is actually not just your business. It's all of our business. But he does it without causing more violence. And so it was both a literal invitation to do that, and people all over India and beyond actually did this, men and women. They got all these things about it. I said I needed some tea. I said my dog escaped. I said there was a snake. All of these excuses to just interrupt. But it also is a metaphor for what are all the ways that we could, without creating more violence, just make an implicit or explicit statement that is not okay. Even if you think it's something private, it's public. Even the guy, did you guys see the video that went viral on YouTube last year about Snacking Man? No? Okay, this is a good one. Really quick. So there was a fight on the subway. It was a man and a woman arguing. It's escalating. You can find this on YouTube. And everyone's getting, subway nervous, And so then they're fighting, and people are worried that they're going to come to blows and something terrible is going to happen. And all of a sudden, this tall guy, but such very, with very calm body language, eating potato chips, just steps in between them, just kind of drifts over, stands in between them, doesn't make eye contact, and it's enough for them both to be like it's enough to just kind of pull out the plug and just weird them out for enough of a second that the energy's gone. And so they were kind of and in that moment, because the fuse had been blown, then a woman gets in the guy's face, a different woman gets in the guy's face and says, get off the train, the next stop. And he did. And, not all of us are going to be in those situations, and not all of us are going to know what to do in those situations. But the idea is to have that idea, to figure out what could I do? What could I do that will be safe for me? What could I do if it's even not a violent situation, but someone uses language that I think is just not cool? How could I intervene in a way that's not escalating, but is rather de-escalating? And actually, we have a guy, and I'll stop after this. We had a guy. So much of what we're doing in the U.S. right now, and this is why when I talk about breakthrough, I'm talking about you guys, because so much of what we're building in the U.S. right now has been brought to us by members of the breakthrough generation who are coming to us and saying, I got an idea. And right now, for example, we've got a guy who is a personal trainer who, the fraternity project was started by a guy who was an alum of a particular fraternity who's like, I got an idea, let's do this in fraternities. So this new guy is cooking up a way to, he's taught self-defense for women in the past, but now he's cooking up a way to train men in sort of the way that men are trained, cops and soldiers are trained, to walk into situations and bring it down. And to walk into situations where you could get hurt, but you aren't afraid that you will because you'll know what to do. And just training men to just kind of be able to be that guy with the potato chips. and not be afraid that they're going to get their asses kicked, which is really the primary fear. And even when a situation isn't violent yet. So we got a guy working on how do I deliver that training? What would that be like? And these are all just people who are coming to us. So that's the way that these ideas, when we create these products, it just kind of gets these ideas out in the world, and people say, I could do that. I got an idea. I'm going to bring that into my own world.
Other questions? Joyce, is there anybody doing any organizing around domestic workers in New Jersey?
Well, actually, I've seen that we have, Hera. I decided, we can build and we can exchange and build from there, because actually, like you said, the bill doesn't really cover the domestic workers in New Jersey, and we have members who work in New Jersey, but, they're not covered, so it would be great to
Who's
build.
going to start it? Raise your hands.
Yeah, build a relationship and let's work together and get something going. Because Hawaii has a Bill of Rights.
You could go to Hawaii to learn from them.
And you have Boston has just gone on, California, and all around people we need to begin to work on.
My question is, the story that you told
Get the
of
microphone down.
the story that you told of the woman who was dismissed at 3 o'clock in the morning. As far as the Bill of Rights, what's been put in there to protect women in that situation, and what kind of punishments do the employers find? Is it just fines, or is there real consequences other than just financial on the employers?
When that happened, we didn't have a Bill of Rights. But what we did, we were fighting for the rights of workers without the Bill of Rights. And through that, we took on those her employers. And the same year that Obama he won his first election, I remember when he was sworn in, we were in court with her in her employers. What happened actually, I'm a radical. I believe in fighting for the workers. So we actually go to the workplaces, we shame them. We go to where they live and we shame them. Letting the people know this is the kind of person that you are for a night. And what we did, they had a salon up in the Queens. And when we began to go there in a restaurant and we did what we had to do, they moved to Long Island. We couldn't find them. And then we, allies, they found them for us. So one evening after a general meeting, a Saturday, we had 2 vans and we said, who's going? And the members got on it. We went and held a big rally outside their homes. So we went to court and she won her case.
So was it just a financial
Yeah, they settled, because at that time, she was paid $2.50 an hour. And we won that case, and she got her settlement, and she's back in Colombia.
I have another question. This might just be completely ridiculous, but is there a way for people who apply for workers' visas in New York specifically that they could get maybe a leaflet or a pamphlet or something that describes the domestic workers' Bill of Rights when they actually return the approved visa application to the employees or to even the employees?
We have the Bill of Rights online, and it's in the Department of Labor website, and also with those workers with the visas, we have Damayan and Andakar and other organizations that actually work with like diplomats and those people with visas. But most of the people we work with are people who work privately within the homes, whose jobs are actually by friends or, somebody, right, like one.
When Laura had mentioned the au pairs, is there a way for the companies that actually facilitate the au pairs to, have this information that they provide to their employee with their worker visa? Like make it, because I know that I've applied many immigration visas and they do send leaflets out with specific types of visa, is there something like for the domestic workers visas like that they could provide the source of information directly to the person applying for that worker's visa.
Yeah, but they should have a copy, everything that you get, you should have a copy. Like, I say to workers, even when you're working the household and you're working 40 hours or more, you should be covered by workers' compensation. And your employer is supposed to have that certificate posted where you, the worker, can see it, and many employers do not do that. They have to post it where you can see it. Even not only that, even if you're working in an office, that should be posted that you can see it. So, like, that's why we say to workers, like, contracts. Make sure you have a contract, but a contract that is signed by the employer. Because a lot of them give the contracts and they don't sign it. But make sure the employers sign it as well. And make sure you have a copy, put that in a safe place. Because when anything happens and they break that contract, we had an employer who gave a worker a contract for 3 years, broke the contract, and had to pay the worker for 3 years. So it's all right, you know, so always make sure you get a copy. There is, you can go on the website, you can print it off, you can educate yourself about lots and lots of different things. Laura has a whole pamphlet there with everything you can take. No, what you can get, for the one set is made up for the employers and one set is for the employees. And simple things that workers do not know. Like, for instance, we have workers like nannies who've been working in a household and might break a piece of china. And the employer takes out money every week until they have the price of that piece of china covered. They can't do it. It's against the law, and it's in that. You know, even if they're washing the Johnny Little shirt strap, they want to charge the worker for it. No, they can't do it. But the worker don't know. But you've got to educate them and let them know that all of those things are in the We Care post that we have. And it's also in the Department of Labor website. So sometimes we work even in offices, and we don't even know what our rights are. If we feel that if your boss walk in and say, I need this here typed up, and when you type it, you can leave. And it is 2 minutes to 4, you finish work at 4. And you feel that you have to type it up before you leave because you want your job tomorrow. You don't.
No, I'll do it tomorrow.
you know, but you feel, oh, I need my work, so my family depends on my income, so I have to sit here and type. And you have to stay there till 6, and you're not getting overtime. And you know something that we find out that even we are even salarized workers have rights to overtime. A lot of people don't know that. You see, but like mine too come from a lot of research and educating myself more and more about this industry, about labor, and about whatever is going on. Because especially with women, because that's really what empowered me so much. Getting to know how women were treated years and years and years, and decades and decades and decades ago. When you think about a couple decades ago, we three can have the voice that we have. But we have to make it happen. And we have to continue to make things happen. Because before we believe that behind every successful man, there was a woman. Now we have turned it around. And the women are living free. Because that's the way that we came along believing too. A woman place was in the home. A woman place was here. A woman had to sit back and let the men stay. No. We have to be our own voices.
I think I need to I have one other question about domestic workers. A friend of mine has been a nanny for quite a long time and is continually But, so she was trying to get a better job for herself by going through an agency that said it placed nannies, right? And they had a big form to fill out, and one of the questions on the form is, have you ever been arrested? And because she's not too bright, she said, anyway, she said yes. In 1982, she was arrested in an anti-apartheid demonstration. That long ago, and that was the only time. That agency simply said they could not deal with her at all. So her access to trying to find somebody who would help protect her rights was cut off because they had some, like, stupid, in my view, rule that said no matter what, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. I'm just wondering, those kind of whether you all work, what your experience is with those kind of agencies that claim they are like being employment agencies for nannies and domestic workers, and whether or not how just they are, or whether they're just profit-making companies.
Right. Actually, we work with Latino Justica, and they work against the agencies, and they represent workers against the agencies. But what you've just spoken about under the human rights law, that is not so. That you cannot prohibit anyone from obtaining a job because of that. And what I'm saying to within the agencies, some people when they go to the agencies and the agencies say they walk away without following through to find out if this really is so, or following up why, or trying to get as much information as can this really happen. And a lot of the agencies get away with a lot of things, not only that. And that's why we bring in people from these agencies, from like Latino Justica, to talk to our members, and then members from out too, that how much that they should pay an agency for a job. And you know, some agency have people paying them a week's pay for weeks and months, and it is not so. You only should pay them X amount, and that's that, and no more. You know, and it's things like these that when I speak about educating people and getting to know, that really helps. So what a person should have done is go to the Human Rights Division to find out about it. And they're always willing, and you know, and they're even on, you know, we've got to use the website, the internet more. We've got to make use of these things because there's a lot of things that you do not know, and you're amazed to see that if you Google it or you go on the website, that you know, you say, wow, this really happened. And, you know, so that person should have followed through. Especially with the Human Rights Division.
That I'm sure that didn't.
Yeah.
So could we use this moment to take just a break? There are different kinds of people in the audience. Some are students from one class, some are students from another class. And one of the classes was supposed to stop at 3:35, and they have other classes they have to dash to. But I'm Mary Hawksworth in Women's and Gender Studies, and it's my students who are about to pounce out the door because they have other classes they need to go to. But I wanted to thank you all so much. This is a class in feminist practices, and the students have been studying issues pertaining to domestic workers, issues pertaining to violence against women, huge questions about how do you try to stop these things. So thank you so very much for sharing your expertise and sharing the excitement of being an activist on the front line with the students. It's really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So anybody that has to, that needs to go right now can go, and those who would like to stay and ask more questions, move up so you can do that.
If anyone has 2 seconds that has to go that wants to sign up for our mailing list, that would be great.